Hello and welcome after a very, very long time, but lots has happened behind the scenes. And I'm very happy to announce that starting on October 8th, which is this Wednesday, the Hammer Time podcast will return in all its glory to the Brussels Signal YouTube channel. A link is in the description of this video. We will begin with a bi-weekly show. So every 2 weeks, there's going to be a show on the Brussels Signal channel, but I will also record more regular videos on this channel. I have now everything set up in the way that I envisioned it. So I hope that I can both provide the quality and the content that you're looking for. Most shows will be on Mondays and Fridays and every second Wednesday. So on the days when there is not a show on Brussels Signal, you will find one on this YouTube channel. I'll also then pass on the links to Spotify and other channels where you can enjoy only the audio format. So to make sure that those of who are interested, and I hope many still are, that you can get the kind of content you're looking for. Now, today I prepared something that I wanted to share with you for quite a while. It's an interview I did with Raja Miah. He's a community organizer, he's an activist, he's a campaigner, and somebody who was very involved in bringing to light the grooming scandal in the UK. And I believe that, as many of you, particularly my UK listeners, know, that this is one of those cases that I believe will have an effect on how we talk about politics and how we talk about the state, not just of the UK, but of the Western world for years, if not decades to come. Because this was a clear example of government authorities, of public officials, not just colluding with a cover-up, but in many cases, as we know now, participating in the rape of thousands of young white working class girls in the United Kingdom, which, by the way, is still going on. It has now spread. We have similar cases in Austria. We have similar cases in Germany, in France. And this is probably the most egregious case of governments openly siding with evil. I think that's the only term how we can describe it, openly siding with evil in order to stick to their multicultural delusions. And it was a great pleasure, a great honor to talk to Raj. I think you will enjoy this conversation, and there's more to come. This is going to be a topic we'll also discuss with Charlie Peters of GB News in the future. But I think it is a horrifying topic, but a good way to start things off, because we really are on a precipice as a civilization. And if we can no longer protect our girls, the most vulnerable, the youngest in our society, then the question is if we still deserve to be called a civilization at all. So there cannot be enough light brought onto this issue. And I hope that this is a small contribution, and I hope that you will reconsider subscribing, joining my channel, and that I hope that I can provide you with more content in the future, and that we together can join this existential fight for Western civilization. Hello and welcome to the newest episode of the Brussels Signal Horizon podcast. Today it is my great pleasure to introduce you to Raja Miah. Immediately, by the way, correct me if I completely butchered your name. As a German speaker, I have at least some excuse to do so. Raja is a community leader, a campaigner, a social justice advocate in the most positive way that this phrase could ever be used. I think you have more than 25 years of experience with working with different communities across the UK. So you really know what you're doing. You have been in the thick of British politics and what's going on in British society for a very, very long time. And recently you made headlines, if you allow for that expression, with your engagement and your dealings with the so-called grooming gangs in the UK, a topic that I feel is not going to go away. I think it was also underlying the United Kingdom rally we saw over the weekend. So this is really something that's on the radar of so many British people for good reasons. Now, many of our viewers and listeners are not British or English. So if you would describe the situation of what has happened in the UK, what you have uncovered, kind of what your own research, your own investigations have revealed, what was going on in the UK, and how would you tell the story to somebody who is not in the country?
Ralph, first and foremost, my pleasure. Thank you so much for persevering and making this happen. I'm grateful to you, and I'm grateful to all of your listeners. In terms of butchering my name, it's pronounced Raja, but I've been called far worse. So never mind. And some context. I think context is really important. I came to this space with well over 20 years of experience in what is traditionally in the United Kingdom known as community cohesion work, which is building positive relations between people who are different. And my last series of contracts directly with the government was with the Office for Security and Counterterrorism. I worked in counter extremism work for a long, long time. So, I've sat in rooms with prime ministers, secretaries of state, and my work has been used to inform and shape government policy. So I'm not into this space as some sort of conspiracy theorist or far right extremist or whatever label they want to use. I am trained by the government. I am of the establishment, or I was before I came into this space. And the second thing I'd say, and it's important for all of you to understand, is I am not here willingly. I came here by complete accident. And I was raised in a northern mill town. It's called Oldham. It's a very much working class mill town. And I left to go and do lots of work all over the world. And I came back for two reasons. One was my mother at the time was terminally ill. She'd been diagnosed terminally ill with cancer. And I nursed her all the way to her passing about 18 months or so ago. So I'd come back to look after my mother, and I had a very young daughter from a relationship that had broken down. And I wanted to make sure that my daughter knew who her father was. So that's why I came back to a small town. And when I came back to this town, almost immediately, the wife of a friend of mine contacted me, concerned that the local mosque, I am a Muslim, the mosque that my family had helped fundraise for, the chairman of the local mosque was a convicted sex offender. And she was concerned for her children, rightly so, for her children, as to this man having access to her children. And the nature of the communities where I come from, we don't really talk about these things. So she was even too concerned to raise it with her husband, and also her husband was too embarrassed to raise it with the mosque committee, that the chairman was a convicted sex offender. And I didn't believe her, because in the United Kingdom we have these safeguards, these police checks, and everyone who works with children or has access to children is meant to go through all this. So I said, it's okay, leave it with me. I'll drop the local authority lead on safeguarding. It's called LADO, Local Authority Designated Officer. I'll drop the LADO on email. And what then came to pass is just something bizarre that if I hadn't experienced it, I would struggle to believe it really took place. The email that eventually came back was, we don't care that he's a convicted sex offender, and the police also know about it, and they don't care either. And I'm like, what on earth is going on here? So I went and asked some people I knew, and it came back that this man was very influential in the Labour Party. He was a former candidate of the local council, Labour Party candidate, and the mosque was reported in the Daily Telegraph, so a broadsheet newspaper, not some conspiracy publication. The mosque was reported in the Daily Telegraph as supplying sackfuls of postal votes for the MP at the time, who was the council leader, a man called Jim McMahon. So this man was protected because of his position and the political power that he wielded in the community, which then supplied, so the mosque supplied the Labour Party with postal votes in the thousands. And of course, the pattern, as I then found out, was being replicated in mosques across the town. And as we now know, mosques and community centres across the country, the postal vote system has been infiltrated by the Islamists, the extremists, or they're just the gangsters who are selling the votes. So it being my mosque, I openly campaigned and said, this man cannot continue in his position. Of course, the criminals who were associated with this man attempted to attack me, and the police got themselves involved in the first instance in trying to protect this man, and then later accepting that he shouldn't be in a position where he had access to children, and we forced his removal. And I did that very much using social media at the time. I shamed them. I shamed the police, I shamed the council, and I shamed my community. I shamed those who ran the mosque and said, this is outrageous. This is a place of worship. It was never meant to be one where you personally benefit or you get yourselves involved in party politics. And I paid a price for that, but we got what we wanted. We removed this man from his position. At that time, a former councillor, and I didn't know this man, called Warren Bates, and I sat at his deathbed the last May gone. So just over a year ago, I sat at his deathbed. Warren Bates kept contacting me. I had no idea who this man was, and he was a nutcase. That's the only way I can describe him. And I say that fondly. He was a character. And a friend of mine who was a former councillor, a man called Mohibuddin, who, by the way, is an inland revenue tax inspector. So these are legitimate, serious people. These aren't here. Said to me, Raja, go and see him. He's now mithering me as well. Please, will you go and see him what he wants? He's okay. You can have a cup of coffee with him. He'll be okay. And on the first day my daughter started school, so reception, she was 4 years old, I dropped my daughter off for the first day of school, and I got in my car and I drove the half an hour or so from where I live to where this man lives in Failsworth. Knocked on his door to be met by a 6-foot-something, eccentric, 80-something-year-old man and his lovely wife, Joan. They sat me down 9:30 in the morning, and he offered me a glass of water or a beer. I'd asked for a coffee. So that's it. And he did it on purpose. Obviously, now looking back, he did it on purpose just to test me and wind me up, and he had a glint in his eye. Anyway, the long and short of it is.
So what did you take? Did you take the beer?
I took the water. I took the water. And even and then what he did was he went and got his wife a cup of coffee. So he did it on purpose.
So there was coffee there.
Yeah, there was coffee there, and it was normal to drink coffee in the morning, but he was just being, the man I later realized he was. And he went upstairs, came downstairs with an Aldi bag, one of those old Aldi carrier bags.
Yeah.
And in it was a big file of official documents. And those official documents, he wanted me to look at them. And the long and, what he was trying to do was say, Raja, you've cleaned up your mosque. Now, please help me clean up the town. And the documents showed that the rape gangs, I call them grape gangs, you can call them grooming gangs, but, let's be clear what these men do. They rape children. The rape gangs had been operating in my hometown whilst I was out saving the world, as I thought, and serving my country elsewhere. In the town that had raised me, children were being dragged off the streets into a network of shisha bars, where they go and smoke these pipes, into a network of shisha bars run by gangsters. Children as young as 12, 13 were being dragged off the street in broad daylight and gang raped and then trafficked. And the police knew, they all knew, and they all covered it up. And the dossier of emails I released into the public domain confirms that the BBC, the British Broadcasting Corporation, knew what was taking place, and its most senior Northwest politics reporter, whose father was also a Labour Party member, with clear links to the Labour Party, agreed with the council to keep it quiet for fear of, 1, community relations, and 2, there was a funeral of Lee Rigby, the soldier who was murdered by the jihadists, and Lee Rigby came from the neighbourhood town in Middleton and Haywood, so there was his funeral, and they were worried about the far right. They used the excuse they were worried about the far right. So that email and a dossier of emails proved that the local authority knew. The local authority in the United Kingdom has a statutory duty to safeguard children. The councillors that ran the town, the MPs that ran the town, the most senior police officer involved in this, I think it was Detective Inspector Hayden, he was called, was concerned so much he put it in writing how serious the risk was, and they all agreed to cover it up. Of course, I was looking at this saying, well, what do you want me to do? Warren, this is from a couple of years ago. He goes, no, Raja, it's not just from a couple of years ago. This is still happening.
So how long back in this specific case?
2013.
2013.
So 2013. I picked up on it about 2018, I think. Yeah, so 5 years earlier. Okay.
Yeah.
And on it was also a counselor whose name was on the emails, and his name was, I forget his name for silly. He'll come back to me. So on it was Huey MacDonald, was a counsellor's name, Huey MacDonald. He was the counsellor responsible for safeguarding children in the town. Huey MacDonald was also, for something like 15 years, the chief magistrate in the town. So again, a senior, legitimate voice. And Huey MacDonald, the paperwork shows, had been effectively sacked for whistleblowing, for raising concerns about what was taking place. And Jim McMahon was responsible for sacking him. Huey MacDonald, and this is when I think of, this is whether you believe in God or not, there's some sort of divine intervention. Huey MacDonald, just by coincidence, I knew from a past life. He'd been the local councillor on a council estate where I'd done some work. So I told Warren, phone Huey up, see if he still lives in the house he used to live in, which he does, in a different part of the town. I'll go and visit him. I went to see Huey MacDonald. He was probably in his 80s at the time, but still very, very sharp. Mm-hmm. And he also produced a whole host of paperwork. I looked at it, and they're both pleading with me. Raja, help us. We've been to the newspapers. None of them will run with the story because, as I later found out, the newspapers were also, the chief reporters were linked to the Labour Party. It's like a mafia. Yeah, they control the press. They control.
That's how it sounds. This sounds like a mafia.
And they'd all conspired to cover it up. And they said, please help. And I said, well, okay, how can I look the other way? I've dropped my daughter off for her first day of school. She's going to grow up in this town. I'm in a position where I have a set of skills and I can make a difference. And I have a duty. And perhaps this is why I was brought back to this town. So I started writing. At the time, I used Medium, the platform Medium, and just put all the information out. Medium removed everything, deleted it, and to this day won't say why they removed it. I've now since found out that the council and the lawyers and the Labour Party have all been involved in trying to suppress my voice from the outset. It didn't matter. We're resourceful, and what we did was we sent a number of elderly people we knew to the council for the official council meetings. We have these council meetings where you can submit questions and you can have your questions answered. One of the women on my team at the time, Debbie Barrett-Cole, she was called, submitted a question. It was basically saying, Raja Miah is publishing this information about the cover-up of grooming gangs. Reassure us. Tell us he's lying. Tell us it's not true. The leader of the council at the time was a man called Sean Fielding, a Labour Party emerging leader. He'd won like Councillor of the Year awards and stuff. Someone who's been primed to go places. He stood up and walked out of the meeting multiple times rather than answer her question, and marched every councillor out rather than answer the question of a concerned resident about the grooming gangs in the town. The police were called, and the police officer threatened her and the others who were in the public gallery. Nearly all of them were elderly pensioners. Threatened them with violence if they did not shut up. So this is the police officer. All of this is documented, was videoed. The video went viral, of course, and we continued our campaigning. We then went to the subsequent council meeting, and I took maybe 100 people with me. And the leader, again, Sean Fielding, stood up and claimed it was all, and I'll quote, barefaced lies. And I'm, by this point, saying, well, if I'm lying, have me arrested, have me prosecuted. These emails are true. We've got a former councillor in terms of Warren Bates, and then you've also got another former councillor who was also the chief magistrate in the town. And a wedge of emails and correspondence that can't have been made up. It's impossible for it to have been made up.
Can I ask you without sharing too much, but so what was in that correspondence? Because so far your story doesn't, it involves almost exclusively British politicians, Labour politicians, but we haven't even yet reached the point where we talk about the rape gangs per se. So
No.
what evidence were you presented with? What did you find in these emails? Was it just that was there like, there's smoke and fire, or was it did they have names? What
It gets better because and to give you, so we found in there, it was the names of the politicians, the name of the police officers, names of the shisha bars, in terms of children, credible reports, all of that, everything within that. Now, what we did with that was we lobbied and lobbied and lobbied and put pressure and pressure on it. We made it a political campaign. And okay, there you go. Is that all right? Okay, so Warren Bates and Huey MacDonald had tried for so long, and the evidence was there. And we campaigned. We made it a political campaign. I mean, that's what I do. I'm a political campaigner. We made it a political campaign. And we targeted Sean Fielding, who was up for re-election. I looked at all of it and I thought, okay, there's no point marching up and down the streets. That's what they want. There's no point crying and just saying, feel sorry for the survivors, because it's safe ground for them. What can we do to hold them responsible? We make it a political campaign. And we say, okay, we want a proper inquiry. The council agreed to an inquiry, but first of all, it was a fixed inquiry where they appointed someone, and according to their terms of references. Mm-hmm. It doesn't work like that. Of course, it was called Mark Peel. I ridiculed Mark Peel so much online and campaigned that he ran away. He refused to start. He refused to take on the task because he knew what was, give him his due. He knew what was coming. This wasn't some random man with no idea what he was doing. He worked out, I knew what I was doing, and he wanted nothing to do with it. Andy Burnham is a man who now is being touted as becoming the next Prime Minister. The Labour Party, opposition members in the Labour Party are trying to get him to become an MP so he can run against Keir Starmer. It was all over the news over the weekend here. Yeah. So Andy Burnham agreed to do what he called an assurance review into my allegations. All my allegations, everything I'd released in the public domain. And he spent over 2 years with his expert team looking into it. They had 10 case studies in the end, just 10. Raja, they've said there's no cover-up. We need to move on. All this time, I've got survivors coming to me, Ralph. I've got survivors, the families coming to me, and it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And it became very clear that there had been a cover-up. And in the end, Maggie Oliver, who's she's the famous campaigner on this, the former police officer who fronts this lovely lady, I think, people, I am far more aggressive and assertive in my campaigning style. But people like Maggie Oliver are the sort of women you invite into your house to have afternoon tea. Yeah. Even Maggie Oliver stood up and claimed Burnham was involved in the cover-up. And the assurance review in Oldham is, it was a sham. So what we demonstrated was how this assurance review was a sham. And actually what we needed was an independent public inquiry. A genuine public inquiry where those who have committed the crimes or have been accused of committing the crimes are not responsible for investigating themselves. Yeah, stands for reason. So Andy Burnham's assurance review was at fault for a number of reasons. First and foremost, an assurance review into the alleged cover-up of the rape gang of children failed to interview any of the children that were gang raped. So how can you have an investigation that doesn't speak to the victims? Secondly, the witnesses, such as myself and others, like Huey MacDonald, I refused to give testimony because they told me that the testimony would not be recorded. They would take selective notes and decide what was important and pick up on that. I'm like, hold on, how can you take selective notes? How can you decide what's important? Surely all of it needs to be transcribed. And how hard is it in this day and age to get a tape recorder and transcribe the full testimony? They refused. And those who gave testimony repeatedly either backed out after the notes that came out that they was put in front of them did not reflect what they believed they testified, or just refused to sign off the testimonies because of inaccuracies. So procedurally, it was a sham. In terms of its content, whilst they were keen to say there was no cover-up, you've got to read the small print of the report. In all the emails I released, all of that, they confirmed the following. Every case study they looked at, children had been gang raped, and the authorities had failed them. Every case study. They only looked at 10 case studies, and in every one, children had been gang raped. Ralph, what they failed to say was how many children in the town had been gang raped. How can you say we took a sample of 10, but not say actually what the actual number was? Covered that up. They then confirmed that year after year after year, children were being dragged into these shisha bars and gang raped. And they knew. Not once, year after year after year. There was even testimony from a police officer confirming that he'd seen it with his own eyes. A child dragged into a shisha bar in school uniform in broad daylight. And no one knows where his report went to. You're looking shocked. You're looking shocked, and I'm looking at your face.
I am. This sounds. This is, and I know I followed that. I followed your reporting. I followed, GB News, Charlie's reporting. I read what Mark Stein has written about it. So I know that everything you're saying is true. But every time I hear it, there's this part of me that says this cannot be true, right? This just cannot be true. So even faced with the evidence, there is a part of me that probably wishes that it is not true. So let me ask you. Why did they cover it up?
Okay. So this is where we get to. The head of communications was a man called Carl Marsden. The report confirms Carl Marsden celebrated how we kept this out of the news and convinced the BBC not to run with it. He celebrated that it was kept out of the news. And this was under the tenure of Jim McMahon, who now, until last week, was a government minister. He was the communities minister, the local government minister. So this is how high the cover-up goes and how these people were rewarded. Now, in terms of why they covered it up, it's because the people who were gang raping these children were senior figures in the local Pakistani community. And the key man that we exposed was a man called Shabir Ahmed. Shabir Ahmed is in prison currently. He was the ringleader of the Rochdale Grooming Gang. One of the first grooming gangs to make the news. Shabir Ahmed was the ringleader. He liked to go by the nickname of Daddy. He liked the girls to call him Daddy whilst he was raping them and selling them. Shabir Ahmed, we exposed, was a senior member of the Labour Party in the town, a senior fixer for the Labour Party. And Andy Burnham's team had to confirm also that Shabir Ahmed worked for the very council where these rapes were taking place in. So Shabir Ahmed wasn't just some random bloke. He worked for the council. He was a welfare officer for the council. And what they still hid was, whilst he was a welfare officer for the council, he was seconded to something called a Pakistani community centre. And he sat and gave advice in that Pakistani community centre. And the advice he would give, he would have a book and he would book appointments for his customers who came to the community centre, funded by the taxpayer. He would book appointments for his customers to gang rape children. 9 times, again, it's covered up in the report because of the way it's presented and it's hidden, but 9 times the police should have arrested him, should have charged him. Serious safeguarding protocols should have been investigated. 9 times they let him go. No one to this day explains why 9 times they let him go.
If you would have to speculate, were they afraid?
No, because he was politically connected, Ralph, because he controlled votes. He supplied votes. And using those votes is how people like Jim McMahon became MP. because the bloc Muslim vote in a town like mine is the difference between winning and losing.
Have you experienced anything from the Pakistani or the Muslim community? I mean, was there any resistance or I assume, or awareness of what was going on? But I assume if the Labour politicians knew it, then I guess that within the Pakistani community it must have known. So maybe can you describe a little bit how this came together, and that unless people like you tried to draw attention to it, that everybody tried either to cover it up or, I assume, participated in it.
So I think those who participated in it in a town such as mine are in the thousands. And I'll quantify this. There was a whistleblower who came to me who worked as a taxi driver, a Bangladeshi man, worked as a taxi driver in a local taxi firm. He shared a story with me of how he found a 12 or 13-year-old child in distress on the street. He picked her up in his taxi, took her back to the taxi station, and arranged for the girls to phone the police. You know, the girls who worked behind there. And like he's a father, like a caring father, he then chased up the police to say, listen, I brought in a child who clearly had horrible things done to her. What have you done? Mr., and I'll use a pseudonym surname, Mr. Ali, was the police's response. If we arrested one, we'd have to arrest half of the town.
Good Lord.
Yeah. And he came to me once, you know, so there were people from my community who looked like me who were objecting to this all the time. But the police were protecting the politicians who were protecting the bloc vote. And the newspapers were refusing to report on it because the newspaper journalists were also politically of the left, and the newspapers themselves relied on contracts from the very councils that they'd be exposing. You can see the complete, you know, how mafia-like this was. Shabir Ahmed himself, and I share this story all the time because I get accused of being anti-Pakistani or racist. This isn't me being anti-Pakistani or racist at all. Shabir Ahmed's wife committed suicide in the local boating lake. The local boating lake is in a park called Alexander Park. I played in that park as a child. I took my daughter there when she was young. The boating lake, if you fell in it and I fell in it, the water would come to maybe the top of our chest at the most. She forced herself under the water and committed suicide. His two daughters were the actual ones who kept repeatedly going to the police. The older daughter kept repeatedly going to the police. It was the older daughter who was trying to get him arrested. He wasn't arrested because he was gang raping little white girls all over the place and selling them. He was arrested because his own family members were appalled at not just what he was doing externally, but I suspect what he was doing within the family unit. And the police refused to intervene. Children going to the police station, crying, saying, this man is raping me, he's raping my younger sister. All of this is still covered up to this day. And I'll tell you something more with this in terms of the community and how powerful this man was. Those two children are now in some form of witness protection scheme. Identities changed and everything. Why? Because of how powerful he was and how connected he was. Fast forward to the report coming out. Andy Burnham's in the Oldham Council Chamber. A man called Abdul Jabbar is in the council chamber as well. Abdul Jabbar is linked to the mosque I talked about. His brother is the chairman of the mosque, or the secretary of the mosque. His brother effectively runs the mosque, a man called Abdul Karim. Abdul Jabbar is sat there, and he's facing allegations in that meeting from members of the public who are angry. Jabbar, you gave Shabir Ahmed a reference. You knew him. The local newspaper, remember the council-funded newspaper, protects him and runs a story, the Oldham Times. Again, all of this is publicly documented. And for 3 years, Ralph, we campaigned and we kept removing Labour Party politicians. At the ballot box, lawfully, legally, we removed, campaigned. I'm a campaigner, I come from a campaigning background. We removed Labour Party politicians at the ballot box. The consequence of that was that the police repeatedly dawn raided my house and arrested me and charged me under fabricated cases, completely made up allegations against me and charged me. And the local newspaper ran with a headline that I had been arrested as a child sex offender.
I mean, everything that we hear about the so-called Epstein files in the case of the UK, I mean, it's not just rumor. This seems like precisely such a story.
Yeah, and the state is complicit. The state sanctioned child rape. Let's be clear what I'm stating here. The state sanctioned child rape, and the consequences was when we exposed it, and we exposed it in a way where we held them to account. So I'm not interested in marching up and down the street and allowing myself and 100 people to get arrested. I don't need to go on TV to cry about the survivors and say, isn't it awful? I say, I'm from a place of this is wrong. Who did it? Who covered it up? And how are we going to hold them responsible? And if that makes me, they describe me as a dangerous man. So the Labour Party on record MPs have described me as a dangerous man. Of course I'm a dangerous man. I want to see you in prison. I want to see the politicians who exchange little girls for votes put in prison. I want to see the tens of thousands of men. I don't care if they're my relatives or my brother. I don't care who they are. I want to see those men who were involved in the gang rape of children. And Katie Lamb, the Conservative MP, stood up in Parliament a few months ago and read some of the court transcripts of what was done to these children. 50 men a night, 12-year-old child. It could be your daughter. It could be my daughter. And you say I shouldn't be angry? Why? Just because they're white children, I shouldn't be angry? Children are children, Ralph. And this is outrageous. And if I am a trained anti-racist that I am, well, then these were racially motivated crimes. The men themselves have admitted that they targeted these girls because they were white and they saw white culture as beneath them, as somehow dirty. And they call these children dirty white slags. This is what these men did. They legitimized their actions through their interpretation of religion. When some of them were convicted in the courts, as they were being marched out, they were shouting Allahu Akbar. This is outrageous. And we need to do something about this, which is why we campaigned. We, in the end, took over the council and forced the council to write a letter to the government saying Andy Burnham's assurance review wasn't good enough. We want a national inquiry. The government, a woman called Jess Phillips, rejected that national inquiry and defeated. By this point, I'm defeated. Come up to Christmas, just the Christmas gone. My mother had died. Before I'd cleared my name, my house had been dawn raided 3 times. The last time they dawn raided my house, the police officers confirmed that they were trying to lock me up, put me up on remand to stop me from campaigning in an election that would have removed the last of the Labour Party leaders we needed to. The police admitting that they've arrested me at the request of politicians to stop me from lawfully campaigning. This is the United Kingdom, and I'm not lying. And you know why I'm not lying? The Labour Party wrote to me, and the MP, Jim McMahon, wrote to me, and I've still got the letters. The lawyers wrote to me, threatening to sue me, saying, we will sue you if you do not back down. This is after every time they tried to convict me failed. They said, we will sue you. I said, I'll see you in the High Court. I've not heard back from them. I'm not a wealthy man, Ralph. I live in a very, very modest, small apartment with raising a daughter who's now 10 years old. They used lawfare against me to try and see me off. They wrote lie after lie about me in the mainstream newspapers. The Sunday Times ran articles against me, fabricating information. Of course, when you look at the small print, the article was written in the Sunday Times by a woman called Hannah Al-Ottman. Hannah Al-Ottman was previously a press officer for a Labour Party MP. This is how this country operates. They used every machinery of the state to go after me. Once we took over the council, we forced the council to write a letter. Jess Phillips wrote back, refusing a public inquiry. And on New Year's Day, this New Year's Day gone, I remember I was sat in my living room and I'm thinking, I have nothing left in me. I've tried and tried and tried, and I shared the letter on January the 1st. It's still online. You'll see on X, on my X Pro. I shared the letter. Charlie Peters from GB News, to his credit, decent lad, decent young man. He's going places. Admirable. I admire him. I admire young men, young women who come forward and take up the mantle. He ran with it. Elon Musk picked up on it. And just like that, the world changed. And now you are speaking to me, and the world knows the truth of the cover-up. And you know, and I know that we will not give up. And in this country, there will be a reckoning, and politicians will go to prison. Politicians will go to prison. 100%. I believe that politicians will go to prison for what they have done.
And have you experienced any support from let's say the Conservative Party or Reform, or any of the new movements? Has anybody reached out to you just for information, for support? What you are describing, let's be very blunt about this, is a major party, the party that currently is the party of the Prime Minister in the United Kingdom, colluding in something that can only be described as evil. Like of all the horrors one can imagine, I think that child rape is very, very high up on the list.
And let's quantify this. Yeah. Liz Truss, the former Prime Minister, gave an interview not long ago where she made reference to 100,000 children.
100,000?
Yeah. And that's not me exaggerating. That's Liz Truss, the former Prime Minister, making reference to 100,000 children over decades, using the same specific model of targeting working class girls, Pakistani rape gangs. That's why we call them grooming gangs. There's a specific model that they operate, and they're also protected by the police because of the votes that they have. Yeah, it's as simple as that. And in terms of the mainstream parties, we would never have won in Oldham if it wasn't for the Conservatives here. There was a councillor, a brave councillor. His name is Lewis Quigg, Councillor Lewis Quigg, a young man. I never met him before this started. Lewis Quigg and I are now friends, and we speak regularly. Last week he just defected to Reform because, well, the politics of this country, I think. But Lewis and the Conservatives in the town wrote to the government at the time. And the government at the time was the Conservatives. Remember, Labour only got in power last year. The Conservative government refused to investigate. They said, you've not filled in the right form. You need to get the council to vote. You can't write to us directly. The council has got to vote. Children are being gang raped, and the Conservative government is saying that you've used the wrong form.
You filled out the wrong paper.
Yeah, you filled out the wrong paper. Come on, it's outrageous, isn't it? It's absolutely so. Now that they jump on it, like the Conservatives are on it. Part of me is happy that they are, but part of me is so angry because when you were in power and you had the power to do something, you did nothing. Worse than do nothing. There's a woman called Priti Patel, former Home Secretary. Mm-hmm. Under Priti Patel, the government released a report on these grooming gangs. And they released this report only after a petition of 100,000 people had forced them to release the report. And that report claimed that there was no correlation. The Pakistani rape gangs basically were a myth, and it's mainly white people that did it. That report has now been debunked as a work of fiction. So the Conservative government were complicit in not just covering it up, but putting out a false narrative using their official reports. Priti Patel was interviewed about a month or so ago, and she pretty much confirmed that she will testify against their own government because there were people within the Home Office who were intent on covering this up. Dominic Greaves or Dominic Green, who was the chief advisor to Boris Johnson, has come out and confirmed that the Home Office briefed against this. They were aware of the cover-up.
Do you think that a reason for me, this is the only potential explanation I have? You mentioned them before, and we'll think about whether we should share them as well on our channel. But I read some of the court transcripts, and if you read them, it is hard. I mean, I think just also for our viewers and listeners to make clear, we are not talking about men romantically seducing
No.
girls. I mean, we're talking about physical violence, about threats of violence, about actual violence. I mean, there are strong cases that at least one girl, I think, was murdered. We talk about
Yeah, more than one girl
unwanted
was murdered.
pregnancies.
Yeah, the
Yeah, so
houses were burnt down with family members in them.
yeah.
This is what we're talking about here, and the government knew, and it gets much worse. 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, the BBC, and when the BBC run a story in this country, it isn't to expose something; it's to try and manage the narrative. The BBC ran a story confirming that survivors had come forward, that police officers were members of the rape gangs. Pakistani policemen were raping children in police cars. This is.
I don't know what I mean. This is it's hard to find words.
And so surely a national inquiry now has to come, and of course they're delaying the national inquiry. They're trying to fix the national inquiry. They're trying to do everything possible to stop the truth coming out, because when the truth does come out, and this is what we're campaigning for, and to bring you in terms of the political parties, reform to their credit, and I wasn't a reform supporter to start with, reform to the credit, had this in the manifesto at the last general election. They've run with it. And in the end, I know they've had a falling out between Reform and Rupert Lowe, but Rupert Lowe set up it's crowdfunding his own rape gang inquiry. I think he raised something like £600,000. I support Rupert Lowe and his team. They exposed 2 weeks ago that there are 85 local authorities through their systematic methodology of where this took place, which is just under a quarter of all local authorities in the country.
But what also in your investigation, what so troubles me, and as I said, every time I hear you talk about it, or Charlie Peters, or when I read the court transcripts, as I said, and it's almost like a psychological defense mechanism. You hope it's not true, right? You almost hope it is just rumor or something, because it is. And again, I can just tell our listeners and viewers, if you read the things about from horrible things that are not fit to be so horrible that even describing them, defies explanation.
You should listen to Katie Lamb. Katie Lamb stood up in Parliament and read out the transcripts, or just a section of the transcripts. And of course, the UK government, the judiciary, the courts are refusing to release all the transcripts. They're refusing to release all the transcripts of the convictions because, what do you say? It's been a cover-up after cover-up after cover-up. It's operated. This is state-sanctioned child rape of predominantly white working-class children, because white working-class children were a price worth paying for the false multicultural utopia that they want to present and promote, and the fear of dealing with deep-rooted prejudices within the predominantly in the Pakistani community, but also in the wider Muslim community, Ralph. And I said this as a Muslim myself. There are deep-rooted prejudices that our imams, our leaders won't confront or won't tackle. And actually, they don't need to, because the leaders from the communities where I come from are like this with the Labour Party. The councillor, the leader of Oldham Council, is a woman called Arooj Shah. Tried to have me maliciously prosecuted, fabricated evidence. So we clear fabricated evidence to have me prosecuted. The case collapsed. It was just one of many cases that against me that collapsed. She, just to show how dangerous this is, she hangs off the arm of a convicted heroin dealer who goes by the street name Irish Immy. Irish Immy was the getaway driver for the cop killer Dale Cregan. So this is direct links to organized crime.
It's as I said, it's like out of a mafia novel or movie. It's unbelievable. But one question that pains me, but I feel that I have to ask it is, now you did great work in this area. You mentioned Charlie Peters and others that allies and supporters to try to bring out the truth. But what about the community? What about the parents? I mean, this is what, when we talk also about the victims, I always wonder, where are the parents of the victims in these stories? It seems they're almost entirely absent. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about the socioeconomic background or the culture from which the victims, from which these girls are coming.
So there is a myth, and the myth that they liked to promote is that the majority of these girls were in care, the parents were absent, or they were failed parents, and that's why they were allowed to, what took place. It was they came from broken homes. My own experience of this is that whilst there were children from broken homes, there were also children from the most secure and loving homes as well. And I've seen this happen, and this is what I find the most painful. There's examples in my town again of a school, and I, because of the way I've got the evidence, I name everything. There's a school. It's now shut down, but it's called Count Hill School. And Count Hill School, once it closed, as a part of a social engineering project, Count Hill was, in the main white working class. Breeze Hill was in the main Pakistani. Because our communities were divided, they thought, we'll bring the kids together and create a new school and close these two schools down. What happened was the white liberal families who would look upon people of my background and my color and think, okay, we give them a chance. It's okay, we've been raised properly. Not everyone's bad. Well, these Pakistanis played on that liberalism and targeted children in those schools. And what they did was they sent in younger boys, to befriend these girls as though they were girlfriends of a similar age, take them away from the family structure, and then pass them on to their older cousins and uncles in the gangs, who would then drug them, rape them, and traffic them. So when you talk about what about the families, these families went to the police. The police refused to investigate. In fact, there's story after story of the police arresting and prosecuting parents for objecting to their children being gang raped. There's story after story of children who went crying to the police of being charged as child prostitutes rather than arresting the men who are gang raping them. State-sanctioned child rape and the turning a blind eye because of the ethnicity and race of the perpetrators and the ethnicity of the victims. And to quantify that, in January, a retired police inspector came to see me. I passed him on to Charlie Peters because he had a much wider audience. You'll find his story still pinned, I think, on Charlie Peters' X-Thread. And it talks about a police inspector who went all the way to Bradford and did a stakeout outside a children's home. And he found that this child was being, used for rape and stuff by these men, Pakistani men. He got a phone call from a senior police officer and a senior member of the council in Bradford. And a senior police officer gets pulled in and told, you will stop investigating, otherwise you will have trouble. And we'll charge you. This has gone as wrong as it can be. It can't get any worse. Well, it can't get any worse. We know the politicians were involved. We know the police were members of the rape gangs. We know the social workers. There's a story in Bradford. The social worker with the grooming gang, a survivor, 12-year-old, 13-year-old girl, do you know what he facilitated? A Sharia wedding between a child and the abuser. The social worker turned up to the wedding. And then what happened? Because this is what we do in this country, the social services decided, because she was a child and they took her away from her family, they'll pay his parents to adopt her or, to house her. And then, of course,
it's also a financial record.
Yeah. It's just, and people, every time I'm interviewed and I share this with you, and I listen to myself and think, Raja, this is absolutely crazy. This is ridiculous. Yeah. But it's the truth. And if it wasn't the truth, I'd be in prison.
Is it still going on? I mean,
yes, 100%. 100% still going on. I speak to families, I speak to young women. As recently as what day are we on? We're on Monday, aren't we? Friday. I spoke with a counsellor in Nottingham. I talked about the Pakistani taxi drivers trying to snatch children. Of course, these Pakistani taxi drivers have got contracts with the local authorities to transport children. You just couldn't make this up.
You couldn't make it up.
You couldn't make it up.
If you would write this as a dystopian novel,
Yeah.
right? Somebody would say that's ridiculous. Nobody's going to believe you,
Yeah.
right? It's too much on the nose. But it's, as I said, it's and even for our viewers and listeners, I mean, it's you have done tremendous work in this area, but it has been corroborated also by the work of others. So I think it's very important to say that everything you said, everything you have told us, there are written documents. As you said, if everything you said was a lie, was libel and defamation, you would not be sitting here. We would not have this conversation. You would be in prison. So we know that all of this is true. What about Keir Starmer? Does he know? Does the leadership?
And not only does he know, he says he knew, because he twists it to say, well, I knew as director of public prosecutions, and I changed the law, or I changed the guidance so the survivors would be believed. So that means you knew. But as recently as January, when Elon Musk exposed this, and he brought it to global attention the way he did, the Prime Minister stood up and described this as a far-right bandwagon. Mate, how can it be, even if it was a far-right bandwagon, even if the far right are supporting, wanting just to have children being stopped from being raped, I have a duty to go and also support children from stop being raped. I shouldn't go and help because, the people who are helping there are far right. Give over. The issue is children are being gang raped, and we have a duty to intervene. Otherwise, what sort of society are we? What sort of people are we? What sort of nation is this?
And this is not, as you say, this is not a left-right issue. This is a good and evil issue.
Yeah.
So there's this. And that's the part I cannot wrap my head around. I know politics can be dirty, and there's always backroom dealing and everything. But for a couple of thousand votes, even if it's decisive votes, I mean, these people that are involved, I mean, they are mothers, they are fathers. That's the one thing that I said, even while trying to formulate the question, I'm struggling with. There are certain things I said, if it's financial crimes or something, then, or bribery.
You understand, don't you? You understand that. It happens. You understand that. It happens in every society. You get that. But this is evil.
But child rape is usually the limit. Right? Usually you would say that every person, even the most corrupt person, as there are even these old movies where the mafia boss or whatever, where they draw the line at child rape. Where there are lines not to be crossed. But apparently in this case, what you just told us, at some point that might be a harsh judgment, but covering it up is only one step removed, I have to say, from participating.
And I look at this and I consider it at least as equal, if not worse, because the rape gang members were evil people anyway. They were criminals. Hold on. I voted you in. You're a police officer of a senior rank. These are people who know better and should have done better. And some of them say, we covered it up because we were scared of being called racist. Absolute nonsense. And if you were scared of being called racist, then what does that say about the society we live in?
Indeed. I mean, do you think is it something that they tell themselves to
legitimize it? Yeah, to try, because you've got to look at yourself in the mirror, haven't you? I look at this and I've aged terribly. I'm exhausted. These people nearly killed me. So be clear, I was suicidal at one point. When I'm picking a child up from school, everyone is looking at me because the newspapers run a story that I've been arrested as a child sex offender. In a small town, I'm regularly followed home. They've published they've issued fatwas against me. They've published my home address online. The police to this day protect these people. And I look at this, but at least I can look at myself in the mirror and think, okay, you know what? When my moment came, I not only did I do the right thing, I risked everything. I risked my life so that you and the world now knows. And I'm so relieved I'm no longer on my own. I'm so relieved. You have no idea when people like you get in touch with me. You have no idea what a weight it is, weight off my shoulders it is, because your viewers can look at me. They can judge themselves. Is this man real? Is he telling the truth? Is he a lie? I come from a credible background. The last queen put a medal on my chest. No, that's who I am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's important to mention, right? That you're not an attention seeker. You're not a clickbait producer. You're not a rebel rouser.
I'm a small conservative, if anything. Yeah, most of my work for 20 years has been done in the background. You would never have known I existed. I'm not interested. If this ends tomorrow, I'll go and sit on a park bench with a flask of tea and a sandwich and watch the world go by and be content that I did what was asked of me.
And are you hopeful? I mean, are you hopeful that, because as you said just a couple of minutes ago, this is still going on? I mean,
this is what will happen, Ralph, because I've spent time in these places. This government will cover up what took place. The national inquiry will be a cover up or damage limitation. We won't allow them to end it there. We will use it as a catalyst for the next general election. Both Reform and the Conservatives are now jockeying for position on this issue. You can clearly see and both of them we will lobby effectively, and Conservatives will have this in the manifesto as well as Reform will have this in the manifesto of not just a genuine inquiry that goes beyond the first one, but also what we make reference to as the rape gang trials. Well, a criteria will be established to say, this is the criteria for which we prosecute public sector officials, policemen, or politicians who were involved in these crimes. And we will see some of the most senior politicians in this country tried. And people say, you'll never get there. People also said, we'd never get here. This is the systematic industrial scale gang rape of a nation's children. The nation is outraged, and these politicians will not be able to hide, and they've never, ever dealt with campaigners like us before.
Do you think, as a penultimate question, what I've observed, and I've spoken, I don't know if you know, I've spoken to Carl Benjamin about this issue, and it seems that, and this gives me some hope, that now it's what I would describe, for lack of a better expression, that middle-aged moms are getting involved, that there is that the grassroots that you and others started is really catching on, that it's no longer just people who are politically interested or mobilized, that it's actually what you would call the broader public, right? As moms, parents, and say, okay, this cannot go on.
And no one we speak to disagrees with us anymore. The far right conspiracy thing is out the window. It's gone. It doesn't. People when they see people like me articulate it, they say, hold on, this guy isn't a far right nutcase or anything like that. This guy cares about children. My entire career is on safeguarding children and protecting communities. That's my life. Yeah, and so when Maggie Oliver speaks, you've lost, haven't you? When people like Maggie Oliver have got angry, kind, compassionate, considerate, when survivor after survivor comes forward, and you look at them and think, hold on, we need to deal with this. And everyone is a mother or a father, aren't they? Or a grandparent or uncle. And you look at this. And when you move it away from the space of party politics, there's nowhere left. Who wants to cover this up? The only people left to cover this up are those who are complicit or those who benefit from it.
Yeah. So what's the way to support your work? Is there anything that can be done? Is there
numbers? All it is numbers. I'm self-financed, so people support me if they can. All of my work is shared for free. First and foremost, I said all of my work is shared for free. You'll find me on X. I'm sure you'll put my handle out.
Yes.
You'll find me on X. There's a newsletter I share called Red Wall and the Rabble, redwallandtherabble.co.uk. It's completely free. Sign up. And we need numbers, and we need people to care. That's all. We need numbers, amplify the work, ask the questions, and have the courage to stand up for what's right, because I know and you know that's what is happening in England is happening across Europe in the same way.
Yes.
It's happening across Europe in the same way.
I'm glad you mentioned it. I mean, this you're absolutely right. It's kind of the uncovering started in the UK, but the more we learn, the more we know this is not limited to the United Kingdom. This is not limited to England. This is happening in other places as well. So kind of ripping off the veil of, and you mentioned this before, that this would be a whole other topic to get into, but there was a form of delusion, as you described it, that one was hoping that the multicultural experiment will simply work and that these things would not happen. And again, without getting now
It's a
political in any way,
conversation
shape,
for
or
another
form.
day, but I'll be straight with you. As a product of multiculturalism, you know, as a successful product of multiculturalism, in my opinion, the vast majority of people who occupy this space, who from my backgrounds aren't like me. And I look at this and I ask myself why, and I'd say this: the loyalties are elsewhere.
Yeah.
You know, and my loyalties to the place I call my home, and to all of the people around me, regardless of their religion or their background. I care, and unfortunately, in the places I come from, some people care for some groups more than they do others. And you just need to look at the Gaza stuff and the politicization of Islam and all of that. And that's a conversation I'll happily have with you another day. But it's failed. Multiculturalism, as we know it, has failed.
No, we'll definitely have you on again. I think you're a deeply, deeply fascinating and interesting person. There is much more to talk about. That this was just, let's say, your current life's work, but I would be very interested to hear your views and takes on other issues as well. Without further ado, I kept you longer than originally planned, but I think it was absolutely worth it. I apologize for cutting so deeply into your day. Raja Miah, thank you so much for coming on, and I hope that we talk again in the future.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.